I need help getting clarity on how to move forward after I exploded my relationship and family. As a bit of background, my girlfriend and I have been in a relationship for about 3.5 years. We live together, her younger brother lives with us, and our 2 dogs. For the most part, our relationship has been rock solid. We've had some hiccups related to both of our mental health issues and previous traumas, but we always have been able to work through it and hear each other out. But this time, I don't think there's a way to work it out. I underwent a treatment called transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy that largely cured my depression, but also changed the way my brain reacts to alcohol. And I didn't find the second part out until last night. We'd gone to a party with friends and I had 3 strong drinks plus 1 shot, which is a lot for me. Somehow on the way home, we started arguing. Initially because I was having difficulty finding her phone in the pool bag because I was really intoxicated and disoriented. It devolved from there to name-calling on both sides, raised voices, and neither one of us really listening to the other. By the time we got home, I was more angry than I've ever been in my life. I've never been an angry or violent drunk ever, but I was last night for the first time. To my recollection, I was trying to cover her mouth with my hands so I could finish saying what I needed to say. There was a bit of struggle where I was trying to keep my hand on her mouth, and she was trying to get my hand off. Today she told me I'd grabbed her neck and that she had a bruise. I did see a scratch on her neck today. I don't remember doing this, but I fully accept that I must have done it. From there, it just got worse. She went up to the apartment and started packing a suitcase, then left with one of our 2 dogs. I don't know what came over me. I don't know what specifically triggered me. But I went to the bathroom and started gulping down any pills within reach, then tied a cord tightly around my neck and to the door. I was not suicidal at all that day, nor had I been for over 2 months. Something just broke in me, and I tried to unalive myself. I started hearing our other dog, who was still in the house, and I'm not sure why she wasn't taken with our other one, whining and barking. I couldn't leave her to fend for herself. So I called 911 before I lost consciousness and begged them over and over to please help my dog. I tried giving them my girlfriend's phone number to call so she could come back for our other one. But I don't know if they could understand me. Before I knew it, police were forcing entry and pulling me up off the floor. I was so inconsolable about my dog that I had to be restrained and sedated in the ambulance. She did end up getting cared for by my girlfriend, thank God. The rest of the night is hazy from all the sedation, but by this morning I was no longer feeling like a danger to myself or others. I was up front with my doctors that the suicidal feelings had left, and what I really wanted was to go home, try to reconcile with my girlfriend, snuggle my dogs, and get back to working as soon as I could. We talked about my history with depression, everything leading up to my attempt. My doctors told me that sometimes transcranial magnetic stimulation can change the way your body responds to alcohol, and they think that's what made me snap. We all agreed that the most I should be having is 1 or 2 beers and glasses of wine, and no more. Personally, I would like to just go completely dry, to never put someone in the situation I did ever again. They discharged me this afternoon, no psych hold, thankfully, and gave me some resources. Both doctors agreed that I didn't seem like I was in crisis or danger anymore. My girlfriend picked me up from the hospital and we talked on the car ride home. I talked first and apologized profusely for my behavior and words. I was as specific with my apologies as I could possibly be, instead of just vaguely blanket apologizing. I said that I know I've fractured her trust, but I would love the opportunity to try to repair what I could through actions. I apologized for putting our entire family through something so traumatic. I told her I understand if she doesn't feel safe around me and offered to go to a hotel for a few days. But I had messed up too badly. There's nothing I can do to help her feel safe around me anymore. She told me that I'd put my hand around her neck, which brought up so much sadness in me because I never imagined I could do something so horrible and violent to my most loved person in the world. I apologized and said I had no idea I was capable of doing that to her. I offered to take anger management classes and couples therapy, but the damage is done. I crossed a line that should never be crossed, and as a result of my disgusting, vile actions, she has decided to move out quickly. I don't blame her. I hurt her on so many levels. I ruined the best thing in my life. The situation is still very fresh. Less than 24 hours have passed, but I don't think time, distance, anything really will change her mind. I understand why she has to do this, but I'm having such a hard time accepting any of this is even real. She started packing up her things from our home. I won't be able to afford our place by myself, so we agreed she should take both dogs with her. I love my dogs more than I could ever express in language. The idea that I won't see them again makes me wish I'd just died. One of them is my emotional support animal, and she has been one of my main reasons for continuing to fight depression, so I can give her and her sister the most amazing, beautiful life. But I failed them. I will probably end up homeless, and I have no car. My girlfriend was gracious enough to let me drive her car around for so long. I don't know how I'll find somewhere to live, and I don't know how I'll stay employed. I can't care for myself, much less my dogs. I've destroyed so many lives with one selfish, destructive moment. How do I accept that this is the reality I created? How do I move forward, knowing what I've done to those I love the most? I don't know if there's anything at all that I can mend in this situation. But if someone has insight on how I can begin to help those I've hurt heal, I need advice. I feel like I'm the worst person, and I just want to try to become someone worthy of being here. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Hey man, sounds like you know why things got to that point. It's unfortunate alcohol reacted that way in your system. Your girlfriend is doing what she thinks is best, and you need to do what you think is best. You're probably in a shame spiral right now, and will have a clearer head in a few weeks. I'm sure things will start to get better for you in the future, right now. Just do what feels right for you. I'm sure you won't become homeless and friendless overnight. Wishing you the best. Comment 2. I started talking with my therapist as soon as I got discharged. The hospital also gave me some resources for intensive outpatient, IOP, therapies. I plan on calling my psychiatrist today, and I believe the hospital sent my chart over to him already. I knew transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, could change the way my brain interacts with medicines, but I didn't connect the dots that other substances like alcohol could also change. Now, for the update, thanks for reading my last post. 3 months have passed since that night, and things have only gotten more complicated. After my girlfriend moved out, I was left alone in the apartment. The silence was unbearable, and the emptiness felt like a constant reminder of my failures. I tried to keep myself busy with work, but it was hard to focus. My boss noticed my performance slipping and called me in for a talk. I was honest about what had happened, and to my surprise, he was supportive. He suggested I take some time off to sort things out, which I reluctantly agreed to. During this time, I started attending therapy sessions twice a week. My therapist, Dr. Patel, has been a lifeline. She helped me understand the impact of my actions and guided me through the process of self-forgiveness. But it wasn't easy. Every session felt like peeling off a layer of my skin, exposing raw wounds that I had buried deep inside. I learned that my outburst was not just about the alcohol or the TMS therapy, but also about unresolved anger and trauma from my past. Dr. Patel encouraged me to confront these issues head-on, which was terrifying but necessary. One day, while I was at a session, I received a call from my girlfriend's brother. He had been living with us, but after the incident, he moved in with a friend. He told me that my girlfriend was struggling too. She had started seeing someone new, but it wasn't going well. She was still haunted by what happened that night and was having trouble trusting anyone. Hearing this broke my heart all over again. I wanted to reach out to her to apologize once more, but I knew it wasn't my place. She needed space to heal, and I had to respect that. Meanwhile, I was also dealing with the financial fallout. Without my girlfriend's income, I couldn't afford the apartment. I had to break the lease and move into a small studio apartment on the other side of town. It was a downgrade in every sense, but it was all I could manage. I sold some of my belongings to make ends meet and started looking for a second job. I ended up working nights at a local diner, which was exhausting but necessary. One evening, while working at the diner, I saw my girlfriend walk in with her new boyfriend. They didn't see me, and I was grateful for that. Watching them together was like a punch to the gut. But it also made me realize that I needed to let go. She deserved to be happy, and I couldn't be the one to give her that anymore. I focused on my work, trying to push the pain aside. A few weeks later, I got a call from my girlfriend. She wanted to meet and talk. My heart raced as I agreed, not knowing what to expect. We met at a park, a neutral place where we could talk without the weight of our shared memories. She told me that she had been seeing a therapist too and was working through her own issues. She said she didn't hate me, but couldn't forget what happened. She needed closure, and so did I. We talked for hours, revisiting that night and everything that led up to it. I apologized again, and this time it felt more genuine. I wasn't just saying sorry. I was taking responsibility for my actions. She told me about her new boyfriend and how things weren't working out. She was still scared, still hurt. I listened, offering support without expecting anything in return. By the end of our conversation, we both felt a sense of relief. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step towards healing. After that meeting, I felt a shift within myself. I started focusing more on my recovery and less on the past. I joined a support group for people who had gone through similar experiences. Sharing my story and hearing others helped me feel less alone. I also started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Being around dogs again was therapeutic, and it reminded me of the love and responsibility I once had. One day, while volunteering, I met a woman named Sarah. She was a regular at the shelter and had a calming presence. We started talking, and I found out she had gone through a tough breakup too. We bonded over our shared experiences and slowly became friends. Sarah was kind and understanding, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But before I tell you more about Sarah, there's something else I need to share. My girlfriend's brother reached out to me again. He was struggling with his own issues and needed a place to stay. Despite everything, I couldn't turn him away. He moved into my tiny studio, and we started rebuilding our friendship. It was awkward at first, but we found common ground in our shared pain. He told me that my girlfriend was doing better, focusing on her career in therapy. Knowing she was healing gave me some peace. Living with her brother brought back a lot of memories, both good and bad. We talked about the past, about my relationship with his sister, and about our own struggles. It was like having a mirror held up to my face, forcing me to confront my demons. But it was also healing. We supported each other, and slowly things started to improve. Now back to Sarah. As we spent more time together, I realized I was developing feelings for her. It scared me because I wasn't sure if I was ready for another relationship. I talked to Dr. Patel about it, and she encouraged me to take things slow. Sarah and I continued to hang out, and our friendship grew stronger. She knew about my past and accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. One evening, while we were walking her dog, I decided to open up to her about my feelings. I told her I liked her, but wasn't sure if I was ready for a relationship. She smiled and said she felt the same way. We agreed to take things one day at a time, without any pressure. It was a new beginning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Thank you for reading. Aita for cutting off my abusive sister and only reconnecting when she got sick. My sister Nancy and I have always had an up and down relationship. Some of my earliest memories are those where she terrorized me and bullied me. Things like pinching me when no one was looking, pulling my hair, bending my fingers back, scaring me in the dark late at night, cruel older sibling stuff. This was short-lived as it only took me a few years to get bigger and start defending myself. After the first time I was able to get her back and make her cry, she stopped. I was 5. This lasted a few years where it was just normal picking on me, but she couldn't hurt me anymore. As a young teen, Nancy was constantly upset for being excluded from our other sister Audrey's activities and took out that frustration on me. She would berate me in front of my friends and try to be authoritative. One time she slapped me across my face in front of my friends because she said I left a mess. I was 9. I never told my mom because it would always turn into both of us getting grounded. By the time I was 15, I was getting into my own trouble at school, and I learned how to fight. One night when my family wasn't home, Nancy tried to get in my face, so I grabbed her by the collar and slammed her against my closet. But at the last moment, I chose not to hit her face and punched through the crappy door and cut up my wrist. Not bad enough for medical intervention, but I have a scar. After that, she stopped getting physical, and I avoided talking to her or being home as much as possible. When I was 18, Nancy got married to James. They were both living at our home, and they fought constantly. Screaming matches in the house, in the street, on the phone. I couldn't live there anymore. After a year of couch surfing, I had to move back home because life like that is tough. It took less than a month for Nancy to get into a fight with James, and she threw a vase at the wall. I couldn't be around her and rented a room in a trailer in my friend's backyard. My feet and head touched both sides of my room. A year later, I had to move back home again. 2 weeks went by, and there was a party for Audrey's husband, Mark. We were allowed to invite some friends, and when none of Nancy's friends showed up, but a few of mine did, she decided to be rude to everyone. We partied like she didn't exist, which only pissed her off more. The next day, while I was at work, Nancy got into another fight with James and threw a tray of leftover food to the ground. She blamed me for her piss-poor attitude and convinced my mom to tell me not to return. I moved to another friend's into their room. When I was 25, I had my first child. I had moved cities and came back home to visit. On the first day, the manual garage door broke on the track and went too far back, crashing into her old mounted TV. She accused me of doing it on purpose and screamed at me while I held my newborn in my arms. I left back home. After every instance, I would distance myself, go low to no contact, and just live my life. My mom is but we're family. So I'd always be the one to forgive and forget after a few months or years. Things would be normal, she'd have an outburst, rinse and repeat. Last year was almost 5 years without an incident. I thought maybe she finally matured at 38. Then, during a car ride to the store, she decided to completely shoot on my lifestyle and tell me how much of a reckless parent I am and how I'm putting my kids in danger. She insulted my partner, my job, my home. She said I thought I was better than her because I went to therapy and it helped me. After her explosion, we sat in the parking lot and I told her that she was angry, has always been angry, and that she too needed therapy. Then I told her I was leaving and I walked home. During my walk, I decided that this time was the last time I'd forgive and forget. That no matter what I do, she's always going to be a miserable person, and I was tired of getting caught in her wake when she was having a bad day. I haven't spoken to her since, and worked with my therapist on how to present it to my family as well. That there was no moving past this one. Today, my mom called me and told me my sister was sick, and now I'm at a loss of what to do. I don't know how to feel because I was set on living my best life without walking around on eggshells all the time. I figured I was old enough to not need this drama in my life because she was never going to change or apologize. She has never once apologized. So here I am. What do I do? What do I say? I don't know if I can show my support from a distance without having to break no contact. Should I remain no contact? I guess I'm just venting too. Any input would be appreciated, and thank you if you read the whole thing. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Sometimes it's better to maintain your distance. You don't know how she will act and what she will try to blame you for. Then, if you push back, she'll play the victim with cancer. Support from afar is best. Comment 2. Hey mom, can you tell her I'm hoping her treatment goes well and she's healthy soon? It might go better if she hears that from you instead of me. I'm not going to be talking to her directly. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After my mom called to tell me that Nancy was sick, I was torn. I spent a couple of days just trying to process the news. My initial reaction was to stay away, to keep my distance, and protect my peace. But then, I started getting calls from other family members, all urging me to reach out to Nancy. They said she needed support and that family should stick together during tough times. It was hard to ignore the pressure, but I was still hesitant. A few days later, I got a call from Audrey. She told me that Nancy had been diagnosed with a serious illness and that she was undergoing treatment. Audrey was emotional and said that Nancy had been asking about me. She said that Nancy seemed genuinely remorseful for how she had treated me over the years. I didn't know what to believe. Was this just another manipulation tactic, or was she really changing? I decided to talk to my therapist about it. We discussed the possibility of reaching out to Nancy and what that might look like. My therapist suggested setting clear boundaries and making sure I was doing it for the right reasons, not just because of family pressure. I agreed to think about it and left the session feeling a bit more grounded. The next day, I got a text from James. He said that Nancy was really struggling and that she had been asking to see me. He mentioned that she had been going to therapy herself and was trying to make amends with everyone she had hurt. This was new information and it made me pause. Could Nancy really be trying to change? I decided to visit my mom to get more details. When I got there, she was visibly upset. She told me that Nancy's illness was more serious than she had initially let on. She said that Nancy had been in and out of the hospital and that the treatments were taking a toll on her. My mom also mentioned that Nancy had been talking to a therapist and seemed to be making some progress. I could see the pain in my mom's eyes, and it made me reconsider my stance. After a lot of internal debate, I decided to visit Nancy. I told myself that this visit didn't mean I was forgiving her or forgetting everything she had done. It was just a step to see if there was any truth to what everyone was saying. When I got to her house, James greeted me at the door. He looked exhausted but relieved to see me. He led me to the living room where Nancy was sitting. She looked frail and tired, a stark contrast to the person I remembered. Nancy looked up at me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then she started to cry. She apologized for everything she had done to me over the years. She said she was sorry for the pain she had caused, and that she was trying to be a better person. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part of me was still angry. We talked for a while, and I could see that she was genuinely trying to make amends. She told me about her therapy sessions and how she was working on her anger issues. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her, but she wanted me to know that she was sorry. It was a lot to take in, and I left feeling conflicted. Over the next week, I visited Nancy a few more times. Each time, she seemed more open and honest about her struggles. She talked about her regrets and how she wished she had treated me better. It was hard to hear, but it also felt like a weight was being lifted. I started to see glimpses of the sister I had always wanted, but never had. One day, while we were talking, Nancy mentioned something from our childhood that I had forgotten. She talked about how she felt left out and how that had fueled her anger towards me. She said she was jealous of the attention I got and didn't know how to deal with it. It was a revelation that made me see things in a new light. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand where it was coming from. As the days went by, I found myself softening towards Nancy. I still had my guard up, but I was willing to give her a chance. I could see that she was making an effort, and it made me want to try too. I decided to talk to my therapist about it again, and we discussed ways to rebuild the relationship while maintaining my boundaries. Then came the moment that tested my true loyalties. My mom called me one evening and said that Nancy's condition had worsened. She was back in the hospital and things were not looking good. My mom asked if I could come to the hospital to support Nancy and the family. I was torn. Part of me wanted to stay away and protect myself, but another part of me felt a pull to be there for my family. I decided to go to the hospital. When I got there, I saw my mom, Audrey, and James. They all looked relieved to see me. I went into Nancy's room and she looked even weaker than before. She smiled when she saw me and reached out her hand. I took it and we sat in silence for a while. It was a moment of connection that I hadn't felt in years. As I sat there, I realized that my loyalty was not just to Nancy, but to myself as well. I needed to be true to my feelings and my boundaries. I decided that I would support Nancy through her illness, but I would also take care of myself. It was a delicate balance, but it felt right. Thank you for reading. Aita for quitting my job to be a stay-at-home wife, only for my husband to tell me he no longer finds me attractive. A year and a half ago, I, a 28-year-old female, married my husband, a 24-year-old male. We met 2.5 years ago and quickly fell in love, choosing to have him move in with me nearly right away. I own my home and he rented a trailer lot, so it made sense to be closer to work and spend more time together. He was my very first in-person relationship. I grew up sheltered in a conservative Christian home. After a year of living together, we tied the knot and became each other's everything. After a while, my husband told me that it was his dream to have a stay-at-home wife and to support her. So I believed him and quit my job. Silly on my part, and I know. It worked fine for a while. He spoke to me often in the beginning and made me feel loved, but after some time, I'm guessing he got comfortable with knowing me and quit initiating any conversation whatsoever. He began to rarely smile or seem happy, which I attributed to stress at work. At this time, I felt like my emotional needs stopped being met, so I would try and regularly communicate to him what I needed. This is where things turned horrible. My husband does not know how to communicate about negative emotions at all. As I would speak to him, he would just shut down and stare off into the distance in silence, randomly tensing and clenching his fists and teeth as the topics bothered him. I would try and talk it out without him even saying a word, feeling like if I continued pushing it, he would hate me. This side of him felt like a complete stranger to me. So I'd wrap it up quickly with saying things like, "I love you so much and you make me so happy. And I just wanted to voice my feelings so we could grow even closer. Thank you for listening." Thinking we both saw these talks as some sort of growth. Again, I know I'm being silly. Well, fast forward a year after we married and I'm pregnant. We both were so happy, pushing aside any worries about how we can't talk about negative things. I imagined it was his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder also attributing to it. So I figured he still saw it as good to talk about, even if it was uncomfortable. I'm 17 weeks along now, and we have so much to plan and pay for before the baby arrives. So yet again, I pushed aside my needs, attributing the lack of emotional connection with his work being strenuous. About a week ago, he brought me home a sub for dinner, and I thanked him and really appreciated the gesture. I know he's more of an action guy than a communicator, so it meant a lot. But then we sat down and I offered to watch a show he likes with him. We sat in silence far apart as we watched, so I didn't think it was anything more than our usual time together. During a romantic scene, I made a joke in bad taste. I said something like, "We should have a date like that," as the characters looked into each other's eyes and talked lovingly. He retorted, "Isn't that what we're doing?" And I replied, "I mean talking and like focusing on each other." He left for the bathroom, but once he got back, I clarified, even just cuddling while we watch would be awesome, just focusing on each other. So he knew I didn't expect to leave the house or do anything fancy. He blew up suddenly, saying how I'm yet again not happy after he was trying so hard to be romantic. I had no idea. If I knew, I would have definitely tried to appreciate it more. And I did thank him a lot for the food. I just had no idea me offering to sit with him to watch something was a date. I apologized and said it would help to know when he intends it to be romantic in the future, so I knew the vibe. He says that's totally unreasonable, because if he took me out to the movies without a word, I'd know it was a date. He then proceeded to drop a bomb on me. He said that he was happier at work than at home. Despite that breaking my heart, I wanted more than anything to make him happy around me. So I set a plan for us to only talk on the weekends about any negative stuff that still seems important by then. Then maybe we could just enjoy the positive days. It's been quite some time since my husband has initiated anything intimacy between us. So last night on his extra day off, not really his weekend yet, I felt down about it and asked if he'd be open to talk. He said yes, and I believed him. I now know he only wanted me to stop being sad, so he felt he had to say yes. But I could only go off what he told me, right? Anyway, I told him I missed him loving on me and making me feel beautiful like he did when we met. Being pregnant has really hurt my self-esteem. Not that it's his job to fix that, but it is always nice to know your husband finds you sexy. Well, it turns out the truth was worse than my insecurities. He got angry and told me that he no longer finds me attractive because he needs an emotional connection to feel that. So, with how often I make him feel like he is always doing something wrong, he is miserable all the time. Usually when he talks about our past conversations, he normally admits he wasn't communicating and takes fault for shutting down. But these last few conversations, he has begun to blame me for never being happy. I'm always trying to push aside the fact he shuts down during negative conversations by putting on a happy face. I'm always trying to see the positive side despite my communication and intimate needs not being met. So hearing this makes me feel so lost. He can't put up with talking about anything negative and expects me to just not bring up anything that bothers me, which is so confusing because he always says he wants me to tell him how I feel. But now I know he just sees it as me never being happy. What do I do? The pregnancy is so rough on my body, I don't know if I could work if I wanted to right now. I wish more than anything I still had my job, so maybe he'd appreciate me more if I'm available less often. I feel like we're just going to be awkward roommates, living together, raising our baby now. I want more than anything to get back to how we used to be before trying to talk about negative things. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This will not get better. I'm sorry you're going through this, but please, if it hasn't changed in 2.5 years, it will only get worse. If you have support, please leave. You will find work. Your body will return to normal. Your baby will be fine, and your life will be amazing again. Please respect yourself and leave. Comment 2. Do you have any family who could support you? Pregnancy is the most dangerous time for a woman, and it definitely sounds like your husband could not care less about your emotional and mental well-being. Who is to say he couldn't impose on your physical well-being too? Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, 3 days ago, things took a turn I wasn't expecting. My husband came home from work and handed me a letter. He looked serious, almost scared. I opened it and found out it was a letter from his boss. Apparently, my husband had been underperforming at work, and they were considering letting him go if things didn't improve. This was a shock to me, because he always made it seem like work was going fine, even though he said he was happier there than at home. I asked him why he didn't tell me about this sooner, and he just shrugged, saying he didn't want to worry me, especially with the baby on the way. But I could see the stress in his eyes. This was a big deal, and it explained a lot about his recent behavior. He was carrying this burden alone, and it was affecting everything, including our relationship. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called my old boss to see if there was any chance I could get my job back, even part-time. I didn't tell my husband about this because I didn't want to add to his stress. My boss was understanding and said they could use some extra help, so I could start next week. This was a relief, but it also meant I had to figure out how to tell my husband. That evening, I tried to bring up the topic of work gently. I told him I was thinking about going back to work to help out financially, especially with the baby coming. He looked at me, a mix of relief and guilt on his face. He admitted he was scared about losing his job and didn't know how to handle it. We had a long talk, and for the first time in a while, it felt like we were on the same page. He even apologized for not being more open with me. But then, he dropped another news. He confessed that he had been talking to an old friend from high school, a woman he used to have feelings for. He swore nothing happened, but he admitted he felt emotionally connected to her in a way he hadn't felt with me in a long time. This crushed me. I felt like I was losing him, not just to his job, but to someone else. I didn't know what to do. I felt betrayed, but I also understood he was looking for an emotional connection he wasn't getting from me. I asked him if he wanted to be with her, and he said no. He wanted to make things work with us. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. This was a hard choice for me. Do I stay and fight for our marriage? Or do I let him go and focus on myself and the baby? The next day, I decided to confront him about the emotional affair. I told him I needed to know if he was committed to making our marriage work. He said he was, but he needed time to sort out his feelings. This wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. We agreed to go to couples therapy to try and work through our issues. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. As we were talking, I realized something about myself. Growing up in a conservative Christian home, I was taught that marriage was forever, no matter what. But now, I was questioning that belief. Was it worth staying in a marriage where I felt unloved and unappreciated? Or was it better to leave and find happiness on my own? This was a new and scary thought for me, but it was something I needed to consider. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my husband's confession and what it meant for our future. I remembered a time when we were first dating, and he surprised me with a weekend getaway. It was the happiest I had ever been, and I realized I missed that version of him. I missed the man who made me feel special and loved. But I also knew that man was still there, buried under all the stress and pressure. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. I decided to focus on myself and the baby for now. I started making plans to go back to work and set up a support system for when the baby arrives. I also reached out to a therapist for individual counseling. I needed to work on my own issues and figure out what I wanted from this marriage. As for my husband, he seemed more relaxed knowing I was going back to work. He even started opening up more about his feelings and fears. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We still had a long way to go, but I felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. In the end, I realized that marriage is hard work, and sometimes you have to make tough choices. But I also learned that it's okay to put yourself first and take care of your own needs. I'm hopeful for the future, but I know there will be more challenges ahead. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, You'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.